What if I were to tell you that with little experience and just a few tips that you could take photos like these? So we're all guilty of making mistakes with photos, like having the sun behind us and only being able to see silhouettes, or having people look really awkward in photos, or maybe not even wanting to be in the photos. In high school, I had the opportunity to take portrait photos for my school's play and also some portrait photos for just a project that I was doing. And some of the photos that I took ended up looking like this. And with only about 6 months behind the camera, you really didn't need that much experience, and just a few tips with lighting, poses, and making your subject feel comfortable. So I'm here to teach you a little bit about how you can use those tips to create better portrait photos. So the first tip is going to be lighting, and the first thing with lighting is that you want to create shadows. So the first way to create a shadow is called a split shadow, and that would be with a light from the side, and you can see that it creates a shadow about halfway across his face, shadowing one side of his face and lighting the other. The next type of shadow would be a loop shadow, and you can see here that his nose casts a shadow onto his cheek, and his cheek casts a shadow onto the rest of his face, but there's mostly lit face. And then the last type of lighting would be butterfly lighting, and that would be a light from behind the camera. And right now I don't have one of those because, well, I only have a few lights around my house, but you can create that effect by sunlight or with a photo or with a light attached to your tripod. And so with that, you want to create shadows that are angled across the face to create a little bit of drama and contrast in your photo. The next thing to think about with shadows is your brightness. So if you have a loop light and you were to have a butterfly light that was much stronger than your loop light, then it would be hard to see that shadow cast by your nose because that light from in front would be so bright. And then the last thing to think about is adding a little bit of highlight to your lighting. So if you were to have a loop light, and you could also add a backlight, which in your photo would add a little bit of highlight behind them and also highlight their hair as well as just some of their physical features. And another way that you can highlight a subject is by a headlight. Now, a headlight is from above and generally helps to showcase a little bit of the depth of the person that you're taking a photo of. And all of these tips are from Hildebrandt's article that she wrote in 2015. So the next thing that we're going to talk about, we'll leave that loop light on, is poses. So with poses, you want to highlight angles and shadows and also try to bring out some of the natural physical features of your subject. So generally, the best way to do that is by not having the subject straight on because that lacks depth. And so you want to have your subject at a little bit of an angle. So Alex, what I'm going to have you do is turn your shoulders toward this light here and then your head toward the camera. And so you can see here that that creates a little bit of depth by making his shoulders a little bit further from the camera and his face directly toward the camera, but also leaving that shadow. Another way you can do that is by having your split light. And Alex, now I'm going to have you turn your whole body toward this light, and I'm going to have you look toward the camera now. So you can see that that's splitting his face with the shadow and also creating a little bit more depth by showcasing how skinny my friend Alex is. And you can also do that with Alex if you can now look at this light. Now that changes this light from a split light to a loop light and casts shadows from his nose to his cheek and from his cheek to his ear. And that creates a little bit more contrast and also allows us to play a little bit more with the types of lighting. So the last thing to think about, and the last key to improving your portrait photography, is making your subject feel comfortable. Now, the way that you can do that is by making sure that your subject has consented to taking photos. A lot of times in family photos, you'll have those little kids that just don't want their photo taken ever, and you know it's really hard to get a good photo with a kid who doesn't want to be there, and Alex has gladly accepted my invitation and request to do this for me. The next way to do that is by being very clear and giving direction to your subject. So you notice that when I spoke to him, I asked him to point directions of his body toward different landmarks and things that are tangible. If I were to say, Alex, turn your head 45 degrees to the left and your shoulders 45 degrees to the right, that'd be a little bit harder because you wouldn't get exactly the right angles, and it'd be a little bit more confusing for your subject and making the experience a little bit more uncomfortable. And the last thing to do is make sure that you're complimenting your subject throughout the session so that they feel good about themselves, and they also feel like you're a friend and you're a positive influence. And all of those tips come from Arnold's article on poses and subject interaction. And so now that we know those 3 keys to improving our portrait photography, we can go out and improve our own photography. So I just want to make sure that you guys understand the 3 keys are lighting, poses, and making your subject feel comfortable. Now, before you go, I want you guys to think about how you can improve your personal photography, be that family, friends, events that you go to, or even if you think you want to start a portrait photography business. How can you use those tips to improve your own photography? Thank you for listening, and goodbye.